Monday, September 26th.
Ooh.
And it is a history class. It's our last class before the test, in-class test on Monday. I'm recording this for students who are out today. Wednesday. What did I say?
You said Monday.
Wednesday. Test
Oh,
on Wednesday.
you could move it to next Monday.
No.
We'll all be happy.
No, we stick to the syllabus. We don't move things. Okay, so today you are going to need 2 blank note cards in class, and you should have your Revolutionary War questions out, your note cards, because we're going over them. However, I'm not grading any note cards today. You all should have the answers, and you all should have already corrected them. If you did not send me your note cards and get the spreadsheet early, it is now posted on Google Classroom. So everybody has access to it. Quite a number of you sent it to me early, however. So a lot of you guys were studying diligently this weekend, which is fantastic. Yes, Josh?
I didn't check my note cards.
So that is given to you as a tool. You could just count on your own note cards and hope that they're all right, but that's a tool for you to help you check and see, is there anything you missed? Are there any answers you didn't correct? That sort of thing. So the spreadsheet is literally
I
just
thought
to
this
help.
was like a study guide.
Kind of, because that is what you have to study for your
Yeah,
test.
study log, I can just check it.
But also, this is this is the same thing, or it should be the same thing on your note cards. Okay, so we have a test on Wednesday. Are there any 6th graders in this classroom? Okay, and I don't think any of the remaining students are 6th graders who are out today. So, since I'm talking to all 7th graders in here, and on the video you're going to be 7th or 8th graders, you are going to be writing your discussion question in class as part of your test. I am going to, we'll go over today, I'm not giving you the question ahead of time, but we're going to go over today basically the material that you need for the question. And I'm going to tell it to you right now, but it will make more sense at the end. The question on your discussion question on your test is going to be about how our government is organized to keep things fair and balanced. So fair and balanced power is because of how the founders organized our government in the Constitution. So that is the last, I think, 4 note cards for today's lesson. The discussion question will be taken from those, and we will go over it. That's actually why you have your 2 blank note cards. So if you're at home, get your 2 blank note cards out as well. But we'll get to that at the end. All right. So ignore the part about 6th graders. You will have to know about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and it's all coming from those last couple of note cards. A discussion question has to be written in paragraph form. It does not have to be 10 sentences long, no. It just has to be long enough to answer the whole question and answer it completely. But in paragraph form, I don't want you to write individual sentences sort of spread out. I want you to put it all together into something that's it's coherent and flows together. It is the only thing on your history test that is in paragraph form. Most of the tests will be objective. Objective, that means that your test, you'll have questions that will be matching. You'll have multiple choice. You will have fill in the blank where you have a word bank and you put the words into the correct bank. I'm not going to give you any true-false on this test. I find that true-false can be the trickiest of the objective questions, but you will in the future have them, but not this time. And then you'll have some short answer questions. Now, short answer questions, it's never more than about 7 at the most, and usually, especially for 7th graders, I'll let you choose to, leave out 1 or 2 and then do the rest of them. Short answer questions have to be answered in a complete sentence. I attach a point, an extra point to that, and I take off the point if you don't write in complete sentences. But nothing else has to be incomplete sentences. Everything else is sort of, it will be some form of matching or multiple choice or fill in the blank or something like that. Any questions that you guys can think of about the test? Any test questions? There's about half the class that hasn't had me before and you've not had a test. So, yes. Yes, you have a discussion question, only one, and you will have to write a paragraph for that, but just a paragraph. And then short answer questions will be one sentence or two sentences. Any other questions about it? All right, before I move on, do I have any signed homework slips? Yes? Anybody else? I'm trying to see if anyone, I don't think anybody in here has it. All right, trying to keep up with this. Do you have it or no? Yeah. Okay, great. Perfect, thank you. All right. So guys, I found the coolest thing for us to use as a prayer. I was trying to figure out something that relates to what we're talking about, and I looked online and found, I was thinking, I wonder what in Congress they use as a prayer. And I looked and I found a website, the Office of the Chaplain, which posts prayers that they have used in Congress. Every single day they update it. So this is literally Friday's prayer from last Friday. They didn't meet over the weekend. So the most recent time there was a prayer at the House of Representatives was on Friday. This is the prayer that they prayed. And then tomorrow or whatever, they'll have the one from this morning. They do it every single day. I thought it was a really fantastic prayer, and I thought that we could start our day the way that Congress started theirs on Friday by standing together, and let's read the prayer from the Office of the Chaplain. Everybody stand up. It's a mouthful, but it's a really good mouthful, so let's read this together. Okay. Read with me out loud. Go. Holy God, we know that you desire to set your truth deep in our spirits, and we ask that you come to the hidden places of our heart. Deepen your truth in our souls. Speak to us there and teach us wisdom. Read with me. Create in us clean hearts. Fill our minds with pure thoughts and holy desires. Then we may be found ready and willing to do the work you put before us. Delight in us today. May the words of our mouths, the thoughts in our heads, and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you. For your pleasure is not to be found in our performance. Our sacrifice of time and service do not impress you, but you desire a contrite heart, a yielding spirit, a kind word, and a gracious attitude. Lord, unlock our hearts and open our lips, that from them we'll pour out thankfulness and praise. Then may our joy be a blessing to those whom we encounter this day. In your gracious name we pray, amen. All right, what a good prayer to start a day with, and I'm so glad that our representatives are starting that way. Has anyone been studying the map? And can I have 2 volunteers who would like to come practice the map? Nate's one and Josh is the second one. All right.
Oh, wait. Oh, this map?
Yes. This map. All right, Nate, come on up. Central America and the Caribbean. So, guys, when he does this, you'll notice that it says, I'll read it out loud. Haiti, go ahead.
My best is like a 53.
One finger to move the mouse. 2 finger moves the whole page. So 1 finger to move the mouse.
Wait, Haiti?
You just moved the whole.
Boom.
There we go. There you go. Caribbean Sea is next. Now think, do you want to be next, Josh?
Guatemala.
Guatemala is not an island.
Jamaica.
It's on Central America.
This one.
Good. Bahamas, a lot of islands.
This one.
Nicaragua, Central America. Good.
There we go.
Mexico. United States. Belize, which is very little. Panama Canal, Panama Canal. Good. Honduras. No. Honduras is Central America. Good. Atlantic Ocean. Cuba, the biggest of the islands. Largest island.
No.
Largest island. Okay. Puerto Rico.
No.
That's a good guess, but it's on the other side. It's small like that.
Oh,
Costa
yeah.
Rica.
Costa
You're so close. It's near Panama. Dominican Republic is half of the island. Good. Jamaica is an island. Island. El Salvador is over there. Good. And the Gulf of Mexico. Good. Do not look at the percentages. That is not a marker of anything. Good. Thank you for doing that. All right. So at the bottom, you say okay, and then you can do restart. It gives you a new one. Josh, come on up, and we'll have a second time through. Everybody, try to review while he's doing this. He's going to find Costa Rica, Central America.
Costa Rica.
It's not an island.
That's between America and
Central America.
Nope, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh.
Crap.
Harper,
Oh,
did you go to
dang.
the office and get a tardy set?
Our car almost
Oh, terrible. Run back to the office and tell them you're here and get a tardy
Jamaica.
set. Jamaica. Good. Belize, small one. Small Central American country.
All right.
Oh, no.
No, it's El Salvador.
North of us.
No.
Crap.
right under Mexico.
No.
It's
Right
small.
there. You're so
No.
close. You're so close.
Guatemala. It's Guatemala.
You're so close. It's right next to it. It's
Oh,
the
right.
No.
No. Oh my gosh.
Come on.
Oh yeah. 'Cause-
I thought we were talking about the
I meant
like the world map, but
Yeah, no, you're fine. Keep trying. Belize, it's
You have to
flashing
push the
at you. It wants you to.
oh, okay.
All right,
United
United States, Guatemala,
Guatemala.
Central America,
No.
East Central America,
That one.
Okay.
Mexico, El Salvador. Guys, pay attention and
Come on,
help him
tiny
out
little
if he
guy.
needs.
Yeah, tiny little guy.
That's
Yes.
okay.
Caribbean Sea.
Caribbean Sea.
Yes,
The
that's
sea
it.
below Dominican.
That's it.
Okay.
Cuba. Cuba's the largest island. Dominican
Dominican
Republic
Republic.
shares space. Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Panama.
Panama.
Canal. Good. Haiti. Shares.
Shares.
Guessing. Okay.
Yep.
Honduras.
The
It's one of those.
top
That
one.
one.
The top.
It's one of those two. Okay. Nicaragua.
That.
Is the other one. Atlantic Ocean.
Oh shoot.
Oh,
No.
oh,
Oh,
oh.
gosh.
Oh boy.
Alright, Bahamas.
Bahamas is a bunch of islands.
Puerto Rico.
Good. And Gulf of Mexico. Perfect.
69. I beat you.
You actually
Nate.
beat him. There you go. That's awesome. Good job, both of you. Thank you for practicing with us. The game is on Google Classroom. You can practice it at will. Today we are going to not only go over the note cards, but I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories that are outside of these note cards. And hopefully you'll be able to make some sense of the second half of the Revolutionary War. You guys know from having read this, it's a little bit more complex than the other. But you can get that through. It's a little, yes. Yes, go ahead. It's a little bit more complex, and I'm gonna make sure you understand some really basic stuff and then tell you some interesting stories. All right. First of all, I want you to think. Last time when we talked about the war, we pretty much said taxes, taxes, taxes. That's why it started. Lots of taxes. That was a big initiator for the beginning of the Revolutionary War. This time, I want you to think about geography. The Revolutionary War started in what part of our country? Was it up in the north or was it down in the south? Now I'm going to tell you the places. We've read about the Boston Massacre. We're going to talk about New York, especially New York City. We're talking about Philadelphia.
North.
Are those places up north or down south?
South.
New York,
North.
New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Everybody point which way they are. They're up north. That's right, they're up north. So the war is going to, at first be fought in the north. Why does this matter? I'm going to tell you. No, well, it will matter for Valley Forge, of course. Yes. They thought it would what? Yes, and of course that's why the British wanted it. But it matters to our study because if the colonists didn't figure out a way to bring the South into it, they wouldn't have had the help of the South. So they did. They found a strategic way to make the South interested in this war. So the South didn't just say, oh, it's Boston, it's Philadelphia, it's New York, we don't care. They did that by who was picked to be the general.
George Washington.
George Washington was from what state? Virginia. Is Virginia in the north or the south?
Middle.
Okay, but in
North.
the olden days it was considered southern.
Oh.
So Virginia was considered a southern state. So putting George Washington as general, brought the South into the war. Are you guys with me? Geography is going to matter because when we get to Nathaniel Greene, we're going to see how the war shifted from up here in the north to down here in the south. The Revolutionary War was actually fought all the way through the country. But when we're starting up north. So I believe Layla already said the British, no, somebody said this. Sorry, Leela. I have a different one. Oh, who said this something about New York? Are you the one that did? Okay. Yes, so the British were fighting to gain land in New York because access to Canada.
Trade routes.
But the colonists wanted it for what?
Trade, and it had access to the Hudson.
Well,
That's
yes.
also their
Because ultimately, water is life. If you look at history, what you will see is water is life. Maybe say that out loud so you can hear yourself say that. Water is life. How long can you live without food?
2 weeks.
17 days. 17 days.
More than
43
17.
days.
Probably, yeah, more than 40. You can live a long time without food. How long can you go without water?
Like
3 days.
Not very long. A couple days, maybe. Water is life. Civilizations are built on rivers, especially back before they knew how to do irrigation and redirect water and pull it in places. They needed water for drinking, but also transportation, which is what you see here. They knew that the Hudson River ran up all the way into Canada. They wanted to be able to transport things on it. It was just better, safer. It was like technology. Water is technology to them. The colonists, though, liked New York the same way that we like New York today. It was just a really important center of like everything. Trade, communications, just sort of the middle of everything. New York was important. So this is where the war for chapter 10 starts, is up in New York. You'll see this map right here is New York, New Jersey, and over here, this part that hangs down, Long Island, these islands, is today where New York City is found. Okay? So in 1775, the British worked out a plan that they said, we're going to end the entire rebellion, this colonial rebellion, in one stroke. We are going to strike at New England. Because everything was happening which direction at this point? Everything was up north. The Boston Massacre, up north. All of the conflicts, up north. So they said, we're going to strike at New England. We're going to strike up north in the center of the resistance. The countryside's too difficult. The colonists don't like us. So what we're going to do, listen to how nice does this sound to you? We're going to strangle rather than conquer the colonists. Okay. So they're going to strangle out the colonists by making it cut off food, cut off water.
Everything from the outside world.
Yes, they're going to try to just make it hard for them to exist. So the British Army was going to leave Boston and go to New York, Rhode Island, Maine. And when they did that, when they moved up north, they were going to join with another British force. They would come down from Canada, they would meet in the middle, and they would be a super force. That was the plan, the British plan, super force up north. And then we're going to conquer those colonists, those rebellious colonists. Strangle them, true, strangle, not conquer. So, do you remember that when we talked about boats last time, we said that one of the problems back in these days with no phones, no internet, none of that, is that if they wanted to communicate and get orders, how did they have to do that?
By boat.
Because where were they getting them from? For their have to go all the way back to London. Somebody had to go get on a boat, sail to London, get a message, come back, sail back, and then say, okay, here's the message from London.
Just get the guy who's giving the messages and bring him to wherever.
Months. It took months to get messages. So London did actually send a message, and their message said, abandon Boston before winter, remove the troops, and go to New York. But guess what? It took too long. It was already winter. And this is back in the days when it's really hard to move troops in the middle of the winter. So they didn't really have boats to move all that army. He said, you know what? We're just going to stay here. We're going to stay here. It'll be fine. I'm not really that worried about the colonists. We'll wait till spring, and I don't expect trouble from the Americans. But, oh, did he get trouble? Yes.
I have a question about the
Yeah.
Did the person that was doing the message, do they have to memorize it and give it, or did they write it down on a piece of paper?
Well, I don't think it was, I think they could write it down. They probably would have to write it down because, what if they got sick on the ship and died, right? There was so much that was difficult. But, yeah, it was so complicated to get a message from here to there. So, in a little bit, I'm going to tell you some stories about spies. This is how normal people did it, not even withstanding the whole spy stuff that was going on. They literally had to go sail over to England, talk to somebody, probably get something written down by them with an official stamp that proves, yes, this actually is your order. Bring it back and then show it. General Howe, this is what they said. Otherwise, the guy carrying the message could just make things up, right? It's so crazy to think about how slow everything was back then. Anybody else have any thoughts? Questions? No? Okay. So, General Howe thinks there's not going to be any trouble. But there was trouble. If you look at this map, look at all this movement. Every one of these little dots represents battles that were happening. They were happening in New York, Long Island. They were up in Connecticut. Even down, has anyone ever heard of a college called Princeton University? There was big big Revolutionary War battle there. There was a lot that was happening. But the general thrust of it is that the British were winning. That's sort of what it came down to. In fact, in a lot of ways, it seemed like the Americans at the beginning of the war, they were kind of about to turn on George Washington and say, you're not a very good general, you're not winning enough, I don't know if we can trust you, maybe we need somebody else. So, started the Revolutionary War, we kind of had that dynamic go on. But Washington did a couple of things that really turned the battle. There were some important victories that happened in some of these places like Trenton and Princeton, but one of the things that was probably the best for building confidence was not actually a victory. It was an American loss that was almost a disaster. And in that moment, Washington saved the entire Continental Army when it could have all been decimated by the British. This is, I'm going to cut lights so y'all can see the picture. It's a famous painting about Washington crossing the Delaware. In this event, the American colonists, the colonial army, had lost. They were sitting on the edge of the water. in sight of the British, nearly about to be just wiped out by the British. When Washington came up with a daring plan for how to save the army. They were on the edge of the water, and what he did is that he had campfires going, because they did this every night. And he had people that were stoking the campfires to make it look like the entire army was just settled into their camp, sleeping. This is on Christmas, which is not the time that the British expected the colonists to do anything, because people didn't fight in the winter. Washington kept doing stuff like that, like, let's go fight in the winter, and nobody expected that. People didn't fight in the winter. People certainly wouldn't be fighting or doing anything on Christmas. So Washington was like using surprise tactics to do this. So in this event, he didn't have enough boats to actually evacuate his whole army, but he needed to evacuate to save his army and evacuate them across this sort of raucous river, the Delaware River. So he got all the boats that he could find, which included like farmers' boats and citizens' boats, any boats that he could find. But he had them take their oars and wrap their oars in cloth to reduce the noise. That, of course, makes it much harder to row, but it was to keep it from splashing. And then loaded these soldiers and just spent all night evacuating across the Delaware River. But he left people behind at the camp to keep the fires going, so it did not look like there was anything strange going on. And Washington himself stayed to the very end to make sure everybody got on. He got on the last boat that went across, but at this point, it had taken so long that day had dawned really early in the morning, at 5:20 in the morning. The sunlight was coming up. They were definitely going to be caught by the British, who had better boats and all of that. They were going to be caught as evacuating at this point. And Washington himself would have been left behind. But what happened that saved them was a weather miracle. Just at that moment, right when the sun started to rise, fog rolled in. And the fog settled on the Delaware River, and the British couldn't see anything across the river. And then the whole army finished evacuating, including Washington, who went in the last boat. And then the fog lifted, and the British saw completely abandoned camps on the other side. So this is one of the things that really bolstered the colonist idea that God was on their side and that Washington was actually a good strategist as a general. It was a really exciting thing, but it was a loss. It was a defeat for the colonists, but it was a defeat that sort of made them feel like a victory. This famous painting, by the way, is not historical. There are not icebergs in the Delaware River, and nobody goes across on a boat standing like that unless you just want to fall in the water. But this is a really iconic picture. I'm going to show you a lot of iconic pictures. Wesley, where was it? So cool. All right, if you go to New York, go to the Met and you can see the real painting of this, which is called Washington Crossing the Delaware by an actually German-American artist in 1851. Okay, Betsy Ross was famous for song. You probably just know this, don't you? What was it? Yes. She was famous for being recruited to sew the first American flag. There were many iconic pictures of Betsy Ross. Here is one of them.
Which one's her? The one sitting down on the right?
I guess this lady right here. They're all kind of helping sew it. All right. Washington's army spent a really tough winter in Valley Forge. When they did this, where were they headed? Where were they on their way to? Audrey, sorry. Yeah, they're on their way to Philadelphia, which is really important because I told you geography matters for this lesson. Philadelphia is what? North or south?
North.
Look where the point is. Which way? Which way? North. So we're starting off in the north. Valley Forge is really close to Philadelphia. You can see here's Philadelphia, here's Valley Forge. whenever you see these pictures of like winter and really cold, really sad people, these are the pictures of the winter of Valley Forge. Again, this is not, the Americans were not, they're not raking the victories at this point. This is, well, I'll show you a picture of this. So here's Washington with all the cold soldiers. You know, they're sort of just wintered in. They can't go anywhere. He has to figure out how to feed them and keep them warm. You know, it's just really challenging with the supply lines. But this is when Lafayette joined. So this is when, just at the beginning of when the French started, right before the French started supporting the Americans in this war. This is a big deal because it was really against all odds that the Americans survived. Had they not survived this, the French would not have taken a risk. But the Americans did survive. Lafayette came and joined, and then after this, there was finally agreement from the French to provide military support for the Americans. This is another famous painting, Washington and Lafayette at Valley Forge, by a guy in 1907. And have y'all ever seen this picture? This is pretty iconic too. This one, you notice the snow and all of that. Of course, this is not like historically accurate, but it is true that Washington definitely prayed. He needed help from God, and this is a Valley Forge painting. So all of these are really iconic American things. Okay, now we're going to talk about traitors and spies. These are the good stories. All right, Josh, what was it that Benedict Arnold did?
He secretly gave American military plans to a British commander.
Yes. So he is basically being a traitor. He is known as being a traitor for giving away our plans to the British commander. When you guys think about the Revolutionary War, do you think that there were a lot of spies or not very many? Do you think people were into spying back in those days?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a lot. Yeah, they had to learn about the other side.
Why are you saying that, Avery? What do you think?
I forget, I just forgot his name, but wasn't there someone on the English, on America's team who was spying on the British?
Yeah, and his parents, he fooled his
Nathan
parents.
Hale?
Yes.
Who's Nathan
How do
Hale?
you know that? That's awesome.
It wasn't Nathan Hale.
Nathan Hale. Yeah, you guys are remembering a lot of it. So there were a lot of spies during this war, partly because of the same thing where I was saying like you have to get in a boat and go all the way to Britain to get an order and come all the way back. They had to move information around really manually, really slowly. So they had these really complex spy networks to try to steal everybody's information. Because literally it might be Josh carrying the information from this general to another general. One person would be doing that. So part of the game of war was trying to steal information and to do it in the trickiest way possible. All right, so I'm going to run through a couple of stories, and you mentioned the first one. Nathan Hale is known for being a famous spy, but he was probably the worst spy we had. He was 21 years old. The first time he ever did anything, tried to carry any information, he got caught. And he just had it in his shoe, so it wasn't very hard to find it. And what he's famous for, though, is not for being a bad spy. He's famous for what he said when he was being hung. Can anybody finish this sentence? I regret that... This is a famous Nathan Hale quote. I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. Do you remember it when we say it again? I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. That was a famous Nathan Hale quote. Okay. Nathan Hale was not even remotely the coolest spy. I'll tell you about much more interesting spies. There's one whose name was James Armistead. James Armistead was Lafayette's slave. He was an African American slave of Lafayette, who, follow how he did his spying. This is crazy. He posed as a runaway slave. He pretended to run away from Lafayette, went to the British, and he was so convincing that they said to him, "Oh, we've got a great plan. We're going to send you back to Lafayette and you can spy for us."
They're spying for you.
But he was spying for the Americans. He pretended to run away. They said, "Go back over to the Americans." So he went back to Lafayette and said, "Hey, they sent me back to like steal information from you." And Lafayette was like, "Cool. Here's the fake information I want you to tell them." So then Lafayette gave all fake information to Armistead, and then he would go back to the British and he's like, "Okay, this is what I think the Americans are doing." He would listen and collect the British's plans and then take it back to Lafayette and be like, "Here's what the British are really going to do." So James Armistead stayed faithful to Lafayette and to the American side, while the whole time the British thought that he was working for them. And when all of this was finished, he went back to Lafayette as a slave. And about 3 or 4 years after the war, he finally got his freedom. And when he got his freedom, he took Lafayette's last name as, I don't know, because he felt loyal to him. So his name became officially James Armistead Lafayette. Isn't that such a crazy story? All right, here's the second one. The Culper Spy Ring. Now, I'm not going to tell you tons of details about this, except the Culper Spy Ring was the most effective spy network in the entire Revolutionary War. And I know this seems like, duh, everyone does this now, but this was they were really high tech because they would use invisible ink to write their messages, and they had this really complicated network of how they passed around information. And then the pieces of paper had to be brushed with a chemical in order to make the words show so that the messages could be decoded. That was the Culper Spy Ring.
Wait, were
It's
they?
like they use like lemon juice, right? So,
Yeah, so no, but they had some other chemical that they
okay,
used.
put over.
But you can do it with lemon juice and, what's the ink?
Heat. It's lemon juice.
Yeah. Well, what do you write with?
Lemon
Oh, you
juice.
write with lemon juice and then you use it.
Wait, did they write in invisible ink in code?
And then they used special chemicals to show it. And they had this really complicated network that passed information around. They were a bunch of friends, actually. The Culper Spy Ring was a bunch of recruited friends that all worked together. Okay, but my favorite of all the spies was Enoch Crosby, who became a spy by mistake. It was mistaken identity. He was like walking down the road at his home, and somebody said, "Psst, hey, you are loyal to the British, aren't you? Come on, we're having a meeting." And he wasn't. He was a colonial loyalist, not a British loyalist, but he was like, "Okay, cool, I'll go to your meeting." So he went to the meeting, and because they thought he was a British loyalist, and he was sort of on the inside, he became recruited as the very first counterintelligence operative in our country. And he had, you know when you've seen spy shows, that they always have somebody they call a handler?
Yeah.
Well, he had a handler. He had a handler who, he worked so deep undercover that his handlers would arrange all the details for things like making sure he got arrested to make him look legit. And then after he got arrested, they would arrange for him to like accidentally escape, so that he could go back and be like, "Oh my gosh, I just barely escaped." And then they would give him more information, and then he and a bunch of other British would get arrested, and then he would again, they'd collect all the information from him, but then he'd escape again. 5 times this guy was arrested, fake arrested by the Americans and let go. And the British kept trusting him, and he kept giving information. The crazy thing about all this is that it wasn't until 1777 that he was kind of hailed as an American hero, but up to that point, his own parents thought he was a traitor. He never told anybody what he was doing, which side he was really on. So even his parents thought he was a traitor to the American cause. And he just let everybody think what they thought because he was really, really, really deep undercover. Isn't that such a cool story? Enoch Crosby is that guy's name. All right, so we have, before the Constitution, we had the Articles of Confederation. Sutton, what did the Articles of Confederation try to do for this newly formed nation? The colonies, what?
It legally united colonies into one union.
Yeah, it brought them all together legally. And the articles were trying to make things balanced. This is going to be the theme of the government, balancing out the power. Balancing power in between the states and also making the government all work together. So the Articles of Confederation were before the Constitution, if you're trying to sort this out in your head. Okay, last stories before we do the government stuff. The last stories are about General Nathaniel Greene. And this is when the whole war moved from up north to down south. So when you think of Greene, think about the whole war going down south. His whole strategy, Clayton, do you remember? Did you study this? To wear them out by doing what?
By making them chase.
Yes. He wanted them to chase him. So Greene's whole strategy, Nathaniel Greene, General Greene's, was to make them chase him. And he led them on a chase down into the south. Who did I say joined the war after Valley Forge that helped us a lot? Who was it? Lafayette, and he represented what country? France. So when the French joined the war, they helped the Americans a ton. So what that did is that up in the north part, it was at a stalemate. Instead of the British winning, it was like, nothing's going on. So the French made a stalemate in the north, and Nathaniel Greene became the guy in the south that basically led to the end of the war. But this is how he did it. First of all, here's a random tidbit about Greene. He was a Quaker. What's weird about a Quaker being a general? Does anybody know?
They don't believe in fighting.
Yeah,
Right, they're pacifists. So he was called the Fighting Quaker because he was a Quaker that wanted to fight in the war. And he was a fantastic general too. What had happened is that, like I said, up here in the north, there was a stalemate because of France entering, and Greene, like Clayton told us, had this strategy, cat and mouse. I'm going to cat and mouse. I'm going to keep the British on the run. He even took his very small force and he split them in two. Totally risky thing to do because now he had even smaller number of soldiers. But he made Cornwallis have to split his British forces too and like weakened himself because he's chasing Greene all over the what?
South.
It's all over, everybody say it, all over the south. The south. So what happened is that Greene pursued the British commander northward a little bit. He was like going up, you can see Cornwallis right here, Greene right here. He retook all these cities in North Carolina, South Carolina, and he played a really central role because of all of this battle. Finally, Cornwallis with the British went back up to Yorktown. And that was where the final defeat happened. Does anybody remember why we were so successful at Yorktown? It had to do with the same thing we've just said a second ago.
The people weren't tired.
Yeah, the people weren't tired, but who helped the Americans? The French. The French helped the Americans up there. Because like once he chased Cornwallis back up here, they were back up into the territory where the French were. And the French helped to basically finally defeat them. So General Greene kind of wore out the British down in the south. They went back up to Yorktown, and that's where the war ended. Before we go into Yorktown, though, I wanted to tell you the end of his life. Greene settled down near Savannah, Georgia, but he didn't have any money left. He had spent all of his own money on the Revolutionary War. He had even sold his house, sold everything to get money in order to fight in this war and probably pay soldiers and whatnot. So, as thanks for what he had done, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina all gave him land in appreciation of what he had done. But this is the sad end to his story. He died at the age of 44 of sunstroke. That's when you your sunburn is kind of bad and you die. Or you get overheated. That's a sad way to end when you've been such a Revolutionary War hero. Yes?
Why didn't just France attack Britain?
They had fought with them over and over again. They would not have done it in Europe. France did not want to fight Britain in Europe because it would be a completely different war. Right here, it's different to fight in the colonies because Britain has to, put all their troops on a different continent and all that.
Why don't they just cut off the troops from getting there? Like, why don't the French have a fleet built in front of the colonies and just stop all the British?
Well, I mean, they would kind of do that. In fact, France all the naval warfare was from France. And if you remember anything about Yorktown, it was actually the French on the water that helped to prevent. You remember this? Go ahead and say what you remember.
I was just saying, because all of the French took their boats and surrounded where they could get off.
Yeah. But you can do that around Yorktown, which is tiny, and it's on basically a big giant river. It's really hard to cut off the entire American coastline. It's massive compared to England. Yeah. So I don't think France could have put up enough boats to keep the British from sailing in. And also the British had the best navy in the whole world. So France would have had a fight on their hands. Cut your losses there. All right, moving on from this, the last battle was fought, like we said, at Yorktown. This is a famous picture, another iconic picture of Yorktown. This is of the surrender of Yorktown. You have the British general is going to give his sword over to the American, and kind of marching through that. This is iconic. 1820. It was painted a lot closer to the Revolutionary War. This is Yorktown Victory Center, which is less than an hour from us, 45 minutes maybe. It's a super cool place to visit. I highly recommend. It's not where we're taking our first class field trip, but it's a great visiting place. Mm-hmm.
Where are we going for our first class?
Pamplin's Civil War Museum, Pamplin Park,
Where is that?
Petersburg. Yeah. So we're going to get to the Civil War soon enough. We had to take the date they had offered. We'll give you guys field trip information soon. When I say we, I do this with Miss Olson. I organize them. All right. Now this is why you needed your 2 cards. And let's be fast on this. Quick. The 3 parts of government were legislative, executive, and judicial. I want you to make another card that puts the same information in a chart form. This is the 3 branches of government. I want you to write these 3 words: legislative, executive, judicial. Box them up so you can see that you are marking the 3 forms of government, and then put next to it that legislative is Congress and it makes laws. Executive is the president, and judicial is the court that interprets laws. The whole point of this card is balance of power. Balance of power. Nobody has all the power in our government. It is balanced. It's balanced between these 3. Clayton, we're going to end up with you having to copy this from somebody else.
I don't have no cards.
Okay. I've got no cards. You're gonna run out of time. I got this. I'll sit you to the side. But you can copy from him if you scoot over, please. All right. Balance of power. Can everybody say that out really loudly? Balance of power. This is still our government to this day. We have the longest running functioning constitution, and this is why, because it is brilliantly organized to balance power so that it stays out of the hands of just one particular person. That's why, thank God, we don't have a Putin running everything, even though they do have a constitution. We're balancing our power.
Yeah, there's an assassination that sounds
I'll bet
Yeah,
they're
it was a
good.
car bombing.
Recently?
Yeah.
All right, quick on your writing. Copy from a friend. Let me go on to the next one. The Constitutional Convention settled the questions of large and small states. Now, the next word here is fair. How do they keep it fair? And this is your second card. I'm rewriting this information on a chart. Congress is made up of 2 houses. You have the Senate, and every single state has how many senators? Write this down.
2.
Everybody say it out loud. 2 senators. 2 senators. And how many representatives do we have?
Population.
It all depends on how big your state is. It doesn't matter how big your state is. Everybody gets 2 senators. But the House of Representatives depends on your population. Guys, this is how our country keeps things fair. Fair. Balanced and fair. Can I repeat that again? The words of the day are balanced and fair. Balanced and fair. Copy his card right here. This one, I'm using this. Balanced and fair. All right. The last 2 cards here are still important, and they will be on your discussion question. James Madison later added 10 amendments to the Constitution. You don't have to know a ton about it, just there are 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights, and they give us things like the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, stuff like that. But here is something that you mustn't overlook. It's very important. What is good about our Constitution, and where did it fall short? Do you guys remember in Hamilton when the Schuyler sisters are singing their song? I think it was. That they said that what would they tell Thomas Jefferson next time to add? Include women in the sequel. That's in the work song. It fell short by not protecting the rights of women and slaves. That's where our Constitution did not have enough written in. We had to do later amendments to that. But it is the oldest working Constitution in the world. That makes it fantastic. We are lucky to live in a country that is, I want you to say the 2 words with me, balanced, say balanced, and fair. And that's the way the Constitution was written, to keep our government balanced and fair. Even though it was not perfect. It was not perfect. It was still a great step toward having a balanced and a fair government. All right, folks, we're at class time, and you are dismissed.